Want a podcast? Kia ora, I'm Maxine, podcast producer, audio nerd, and founder of Maxine London Creative. Let's explore what it takes to start and maintain a successful podcast. I'll chat with industry experts, podcast hosts, and fellow audio nerds on everything about the wonderful world of podcasting. We'll talk techniques, trends, and top tips to get you started on your podcast journey. Whether you're a podcast newbie or you've been here a while, welcome. Want a podcast? Today I want to go deeper on a topic that has always mattered to me, but I think that it's more important now than ever. How to balance positivity with honesty in your content, and more importantly, how to use your podcast as a platform for good. Yes, we are talking about the power of positivity, but not in the cheesy, toxic way. In the way that still leaves room for mess and realness. We'll also explore what it means to be a podcast host in 2025 and how your voice, no matter your audience size, can still make a difference. So, if you've ever wondered, how do I share real struggles without oversharing? Can I talk about social issues without alienating people? Is it even my place to speak up? This episode is for you. First, let's kick into why positivity still matters even now. And let's be honest, positivity can feel a little bit 2016. Motivational quotes and brush script, endless gratitude journals, pretending that everything is fine when it's clearly not. No thanks. But the right kind of positivity still has power. I'm talking about resilience, perspective, hope. Choosing to share stories that uplift, educate, and move people forwards, even when life is messy. And here's the science. There's that famous article, Bad is Stronger Than Good, which shows that the negative information is more sticky in our brains. One bad review outweighs 5 glowing ones. One troll comment can derail your entire day. It's biology. They say that it takes a minimum of 5 good things to offset the negative effects of one bad thing. 5 to 1. That's the ratio. 5 positive things to every 1 negative. So what part of that ratio are you contributing to? When you share something positive, you're not just spreading good vibes. You're correcting a neurological imbalance. You're helping your audience tip the scales back towards balance, hope, and possibility. Positivity isn't naive, it's necessary. But positivity isn't just about being chipper all the time, it's the lens in which you choose to look through. Now, especially in podcasting where your tone, your energy, and your language, that sets the mood for your entire audience. Even subtly negative framing can shift how someone feels after listening. Think about it. You're not just delivering information, you are shaping emotion. When a listener finishes your episode, do they feel hopeful, empowered, more capable? Or do they feel a bit drained and overwhelmed, or like the world is too heavy to change? And here's something to chew on. Positivity doesn't have to mean happy. It can be calm, reassuring, open-hearted, grounded. You don't have to be upbeat, bubbly, bouncing off the walls. You can just choose language that builds rather than breaks. Here are some practical tips on the language that you choose. Avoid vague negativity. So instead of saying everyone is burnt out, try, I've been feeling really stretched and I know others are too, but I've found these small things that help. Use hopeful reframes. So turn, it's just been a disaster, into, it didn't go how I planned, but here's what it taught me. Check your default phrases too. So phrases like, I'm so sorry, this is a huge mess, or this is just a rant. They train your audience to expect chaos. So instead, you could try things like, I want to take you behind the scenes, even though it's a little bit raw. Now let's get into some practical storytelling tips. So you could end your hard stories with forwards motion. So what have you learned? What might you try next time? How can others relate? Use the scar not wound principle. So don't share something that you are actively bleeding from. Share it once you have a little bit perspective, once the scab has kind of crusted over and it's turned into more of a scar. Include joyful and light stories too. Little wins, funny fails, warm moments. Don't forget your own 5 to 1 ratio in storytelling. But then on the other hand, people do want to hear about the mess as well, because while your audience does want uplifting content, they also want real talk. Podcasting is one of the most intimate forms of media. You're literally right there in their ears, often when they're alone or vulnerable or looking for connection. They want to hear about the launch that tanked, the pitch that got rejected, the burnout moment that led to a breakthrough, the tears behind the scenes. But it's not just for the drama. They want to hear it in a way that helps them feel understood, that says, me too, and this is what I learned. So, what's the difference between honesty and oversharing? It's a fine line, I know. Here's how I see it. Vulnerability is power, but it's even more powerful when you've processed the thing that you're sharing. Your content should serve. So ask, does this help my audience in some way, or is it just self-soothing? And you're allowed to have boundaries. You don't owe your full personal story to anyone. You can show up honestly without bearing everything. As Brené Brown says, vulnerability without boundaries is not vulnerability, it's oversharing. And there's no denying it, we are in an era where audiences crave authenticity. There's a real narrative to get really wild to stand out from generic AI-generated content. But there's a fine line between real and raw and emotionally chaotic. The difference often comes down to processing and purpose. So if you do hit record while you're still emotionally activated, like you're crying, you're angry, you're spiraling, it can feel like catharsis for you, but maybe it's confusion or discomfort for your listeners, especially if there's no takeaway. What makes vulnerability powerful in podcasting is context. It's when you say, here's something that I went through, here's how I felt, and here's how I moved through it, or what I'm still learning. And that's what makes people lean in rather than tune out. Here are some practical language tips that you can use if you are wanting to be real and raw and vulnerable, but are treading that fine line between oversharing and vulnerability. So instead of, this broke me, you could try, this really changed me. I didn't feel like myself for a while. You could swap, I'm such a mess, for, I was feeling overwhelmed, but I gave myself space to reset. Or you could replace, no one talks about this, with, this doesn't get spoken about enough and I really want to open that door. That shift still honors your experience, but it positions you as grounded, safe, and intentional. Here's how you can implement some storytelling boundaries. Ask yourself, why am I sharing this? If it's for validation, maybe hit pause. If it's to connect and guide, maybe you can keep going. Name your boundaries before you record. What is absolutely off limits to you? And then what are you okay with talking about on the mic? Use the empathy test. Imagine your ideal listener. Will this story help them feel seen, supported, or stronger, or just shocked? When you're sharing the real, vulnerable, and nitty-gritty, there is a fine line between helpful and potentially triggering. If there is anything that could pose as a trigger for the listener, listen again after you've completed your episode. Carefully consider how your listeners might feel hearing this. Then think about a way forwards. Do you need to include a trigger warning? Is it helpful or harmful? Perhaps it does need editing down or even removing altogether. It's not about censoring your story because your story matters, but it's about considering your listener. Okay, now let's zoom out and talk about podcasting for good and what that even means. So you've got a microphone, you're building a community, people are listening to you. What do you want to do with that? Podcasting for good does not mean your show has to be about politics or climate change or social justice, although it can. It simply means asking, how can I use this platform to create a positive impact? And now this could look different for everyone. It could look like spotlighting diverse voices, talking openly about mental health, including inclusive language, normalizing failure, platforming people doing interesting purpose-driven work, challenging industry norms in a constructive way, or even just helping one person feel less alone. Small impact, is still impact. There's this idea in Māori culture called manaakitanga, loosely hospitality and care. Now, creating space where people feel respected, uplifted, and included, you can build that through your podcast. So ask yourself, what matters to me beyond downloads? What values do I want woven into the show? And who do I want to help and how? Because here's the truth. Silence is a decision. Staying neutral is a message. So don't be afraid to stand for something. But what if I get it wrong? This is a huge one, especially if you are someone like me who cares deeply and does not want to say the wrong thing. Because the fear of getting it wrong can keep people silent. And as we just heard, silence doesn't change anything. So here's a mindset shift that can maybe help. You probably will get it wrong sometimes. You will probably say something that doesn't land perfectly. You will grow. And that's the point. Podcasting is a long game, right? You don't need to be the expert on every single issue, but if you can be curious and thoughtful and learn publicly and hold space and stay open, that is powerful leadership. So now let's land this plane with some tangible ways that you can bring these ideas into your content starting now. Number 1, balance the real with the hopeful. If you are sharing a hard experience, bring it full circle. Don't just leave your audience in the pit. Give them a ladder as well. Number 2, choose guests with intent. Ask yourself this: who deserves the mic? Whose stories need to be heard? Go beyond the same industry names and explore fresh perspectives. Number 3, use language that includes and uplifts. Be mindful of how your words land. Is there more inclusive or empowering ways that you can say what you mean? Number 4, share resources, not just rants. If you are calling something out, offer your audience somewhere to go next, a tool, a guide, a guest, an action step. Number 5, weave values into your format. Your show doesn't need a mission statement plastered everywhere. But can your values show up in your segments, in your tone, or your editorial decisions? So there it is, a little positivity, a little real talk, and a whole lot of permission to show up honestly, imperfectly, and with intention. Your podcast doesn't have to be big to be bold. It doesn't have to be perfect to be powerful, and it doesn't need to have 10,000 downloads to make a difference. Just start, share, and care. And use your mic like the tool that it is for storytelling, connection, and for change. If this episode resonated, I would love if you could share it with a fellow podcaster or leave a review. Maybe that could be your one good thing to offset someone's 5-to-1 ratio. And if you are ready to take your podcast to the next level, not just technically, but intentionally, let's talk. I would love to help you build a show that sounds good and does good. Until next time, keep it real, keep it kind, and keep podcasting with purpose. Thanks for listening to Want a Podcast. If you got something out of this episode, give it some love. Subscribe, follow, share it with your friends, or leave a review. It all helps to get this podcast into the ears of those who need it. If you're keen to connect, check out Want a Podcast or Maxine London Creative on Instagram, or head to maxineLondonCreative.co.nz. Check out the show notes for links. Thanks again for being part of my community. See you next time.